Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching the Monthly Current Affairs, a series of videos that we take up which helps you revise the monthly current affairs events from the past few months. Now, we are dealing with the international relation and security for the month December 2024. So, let us start our today's session. Now, today's session involves 11 articles that we are going to discuss today. Without further ado, let us start with our today's discussion with this article which appeared in the op-ed section of the Indian Express newspaper. And if you look at the author of this article, it's Mr. Samir Saran, who is also the head of Observer Research Foundation, an important think tank in the field of international relation. Now, his article, he's writing that India's relationship with Moscow, it is acting as a bridge in maintaining the balance between great power relations. That is, on one hand, India has a great relationship with US and also it has a historical and a very comfortable relationship with US, and therefore India has the potential to act as a bridge between these two antagonist powers. Now, the article, he starts with the fact that there is a shift in great power relation. On one hand, you'll see US, which is trying to actively counter the demands or rise in power of Russia and China, and US, it is also involved in an opposite side of a war within Russia and Ukraine, as US is actively supporting Ukraine. On the other hand, Russia is depending significantly on countries like China to meet its economic as well as military needs. So that is why there is a churn in the world in power of great power relations. Whereas India, which has a great relationship with Russia and US, it has the potential to act as a bridge. Also, India and Russia, it has been termed as a most consequential bilateral relationship, and therefore India and Russia has the potential to improve its relationship further. Also, the strength of the ties you can understand is that there are core mutual areas which has enlisted or it has bettered the relationship between India and Russia. On one hand, trade in energy has taken a prominence in the past few years, especially after the war between Russia and Ukraine, and we saw the prices of crude oil, it increased manifold. As a result, India relied significantly on the import of crude oil from Russia, which was presented to India at a much discounted rate. And as a result, India became a key exporter of refined products, and as a result, this refined products reached the market of Western nations also. And as a result of India's ability to source cheaper crude oil from Russia, it enabled India to export petroleum products to the West, thereby calming down the prices of crude oil and its product across the world. So that is why trade and energy between these two countries are so important. Further, India and Russia are involved in technological co-development. The best example of this is BrahMos missile, which was developed jointly by India and China. It is a supersonic cruise missile that since have been exported to many countries, including Philippines, and now it is expected that they will be exported to countries like Indonesia also. So this highlights the potential that the two relationship between India and Russia has the potential for technological development of important military platforms. Also, both India and China, they share strategic interests, particularly in areas of Afghanistan, because if terror emerges from the region of Afghanistan, it is detrimental to interest of both Russia and China. Also, global trade, as well as India is a member of various global bodies where Russia is also a participant, and therefore both of their strategic interests they align. So that is why these are the areas which has improved the cooperation between India and Russia, and therefore these kind of a relationship has the potential to balance the change in the entire world. Now, how can this relationship preserve the global order? First of all, as I already told you, India can act as a bridge, as Russia currently is exposed and is isolated globally, especially by the Western countries, whereas India, on the other hand, has a very comfortable relationship with US and its allies. So India can act as a mediator or a bridge so as to align the interest of Russia with that of West. So that is why first factor is that India and its potential to act as a bridge is a reason why it can help preserve global order. Further, it prevents Russia from getting too close to China. As we have seen during the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia is relying significantly on China for meeting its technological and military supplies and also exporting key products of Russia to China. However, on one hand, when it has a great relationship with India, it can balance its relationship with China with that of India, and so that is why we are preventing Russia getting too close to China, and that can be detrimental to both Western as well as Indian interest. Also, trade between India and Russia, particularly in fossil fuel such as crude oil, has helped calm down the prices of oil and its related products in the Western markets also. As I told you, after India imported these cheaper crude oil from Russia, it refined these products, and the resultant products like petrol, ATF, etc. have been exported to Western countries at a much cheaper rate than the global rate. And therefore, controlling the prices of oil is the reason why India can act as a bridge between these two countries. Also, it allows for new possibilities for India, especially in the crucial region of Arctic, as Russia is the dominant power in the region, and the world is witnessing increased trade which happens through the Arctic sea route because the snow is melting. Also, when India has a close relationship with Russia, it can engage with Russian companies who operate in that route, thereby delivering the goods using that Arctic sea route. Also, India is present in many global groupings which also consist of Russia, such as BRICS, as well as Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, these organizations, in addition to India and Russia, also includes China. Now, if imagine India was not present in these groups would have been interpreted as an anti-Western grouping, just by the virtue that it contains Russia and China, which are antithetical to the West. But on the other hand, as India is a member of these two groupings, it is seen not as an anti-West groupings, rather as a non-West grouping. And there is a big difference between being anti-West and being non-West. So, India becoming a part of these groupings realize that, or it signifies that these groupings are not antithetical to the Western interests. So that is why India's presence in these groupings and its relationship with Russia has the potential to act as a bridge between Russia and the West. Understood? Now let us move to another article. This one actually appeared in many newspapers, including Hindu and the Indian Express, and it stated the fact that Bangladesh government has demanded from India so that India extradite Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh. So let us try to understand what is the context of this article. Now, in August, Sheikh Hasina escaped from Bangladesh and as a result landed in New Delhi, and since then she has been living in India. Now, it is a source of concern for the current government in Dhaka, and as a result, the government in Dhaka has demanded that India should deport Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh. Now, this development has the potential to impact the bilateral relations between India and Bangladesh. So, let us understand, is India or can India extradite really Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh? Now, in that regard, you have to understand that there exists a Indo-Bangladesh extradition treaty based on which India theoretically can extradite Sheikh Hasina. Now, this treaty was amended back in 2016 and it did away with the requirement of providing evidences that an arrest warrant which is issued by a competent court is just required, and theoretically the one country can demand the other country to extradite any person living in that country. Also, this extradition, there are many grounds based on which this extradition can be refused, one of which is if the offences are political in nature. For example, there are many political offences, and according to many Indian experts, it is these political offences based on which Bangladesh is demanding the extradition of Sheikh Hasina. But you also have to remember that some offences that cannot be deemed political, like murder, enforced disappearances, torture, etc., and these allegations have also been made on Sheikh Hasina. So, it is actually the decision of Indian government whether it considers the charges or allegations on Sheikh Hasina as a political allegation or a criminal allegation, and can decide accordingly whether to extradite Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh or not. Further, there are accusations, if they are not made in good faith or in the interest of justice, then also India can deny extradition. Further, if military offences which are not particularly offences in a criminal law of the other country, that is also a ground in which the extraditions can be denied. So, theoretically, even based on the amendments made in the extradition treaty, there are grounds which provides or which enables India to deny extradition request of Sheikh Hasina. Understood? Now, let us move to another article. This article actually appeared in the Hindu newspaper, as it stated that the central government, although the announcement has been made by Union Home Minister that India will formally scrap the free movement regime, despite the fact that Home Minister has said so, India is yet to formally remove or scrap the free movement regime. Understood? So, this was the context of this article. Rather than axing the free movement regime, India has issued a fresh protocol to regulate the movement of people living within 10 kilometers in the country. So, what India has actually done, from earlier 16 kilometers of territory which allowed for free movement, India has reduced this to just 10 kilometers. Understood? So this is the change that the government has made. Now let us try to understand what is actually a free movement regime. Free movement regime is actually a regime where people living on either side of the border, be it Myanmar or be it India, up till a certain kilometer, they are allowed to freely move from one country to other without having the need of passport or visas. Now these are made for the tribes which are living along the border, and they can travel up to 16 kilometers inside the other country without a visa, and this provision was implemented in 2018 as a part of Indian government's Act East policy. As Act East policy, it favors India's closer relations with locations or countries located in Southeast Asia, starting from Myanmar, Thailand, etc. Now, this was done primarily at the time when India's relationship with Myanmar was at an upswing, and this was the time when there was a democratically elected government in power in Myanmar, and as a result, both of these countries, they became quite close to each other. So, recognizing this closeness in relationship, India allowed for a free movement regime. However, this free movement regime did not came into existence back in 2018. Rather, it came into existence in 1968, where territorial limit back then was 40 kilometers, which was reduced to 16 kilometers in 2004, and additional regulations, they were enforced in 2016. Now, according to the new guidelines which is issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs, a resident who's crossing the border from India to Myanmar, they will be provided a border pass by the Assam Rifles, which is the Central Armed Police Force responsible for guarding the Indo-Myanmarese border. And the person who has been issued the border pass, they can stay up to 7 days in the neighboring country. And this is implemented across 1643 kilometer long border with Myanmar, alongside the states of Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram. So please pay close attention to countries that share border with Myanmar. These are 4 states: Arunachal, Nagaland, Manipur as well as Mizoram. Please remember that. Now, this is the border of India and Myanmar. You can see Arunachal, Assam, Arunachal, Nagaland, Manipur and Myanmar share the borders of India with Myanmar, whereas Assam, Tripura, they don't. Please remember that. Now, first of all, let us understand why was this free border or free movement regime implemented in the first place. There must be some need, right? You have to understand that the border at that region, that is India and Myanmar, it was demarcated back when Britishers were ruling these countries, and it was done in 1826 without seeking the opinion of local people. So what we have seen, that people belonging to same ethnicity, same community, same villages, they came to be divided artificially based on different countries. So theoretically, a family or a group of families who were united before, they were separated by a political boundary between India and Myanmar. So understanding this divide was actually artificial and not natural, the independent government of these two nations allowed for a free movement regime so that people can transfer freely between these two countries. Also, the current Indo-Myanmar border reflects the British territory, as I told you, right? So as people, they have strong familial, ethical, cultural ties with people living across the border. Hence, it was recognized that people should be allowed to move freely. Now, the need for FMR, it provides impetus not just to cultural belongingness of the people, but it also encourages exchange of local trade and businesses. As region, it has a long history of trans-border commerce, and this is done through border haats, where people, they set up markets in the nearby localities, and people across the region, they visit these markets, thereby promoting activities of trade and commerce. Now, such existence are vital for sustenance of local livelihood, because you understand this is the region where the modern industrialization has not happened to an extent you'd want in a developing country. So to encourage trade and commerce, rather these kind of border haats are encouraged, which is done through the movement or free movement regime. So for people of Myanmar too, this kind of an option is quite beneficial, as they can access Indian hospitals, educations, markets, and that can also promote the livelihood for Indian people living quite close to Myanmar border. Now, there has been demand to scrap this kind of a regime, because it is understood that this kind of a regime is also responsible for militants and separatists of movement across the region. Now, India is witnessing an insurgency currently in the region of Myanmar, in the region of Manipur, And this has been primarily due to the insurgent groups and its members. They are moving freely across the border of Myanmar. They are not just encouraging violence or violent related activities in India, but they are also participating in antisocial elements or antisocial activities like promotion of drug trade, which you can understand happens in the Golden Triangle, which is a triangle consisting of three countries: Myanmar, Laos, as well as Thailand. Now, this region, it is quite close to India's northeastern region. So, you can understand if the free movement regime happens in this region, it will encourage these drug mules to send their drugs into Indian territory. So this has been the allegation that although the intention of FMR was to encourage trade and businesses, but in reality it is encouraging separatism, it is encouraging insurgency, and it is resulting into drug trade between these two nations. So to stop doing that, there is a demand to scrap the free movement regime completely. Now let us move to another article also related to Myanmar, which is India's obligation towards the refugees which are emerging from Myanmar's territory, that is the Rohingya Muslims. Now India's refugee policy towards Rohingyas has been actually to deny these Rohingyas to come to India and seek benefits of Indian economy and Indian polity. Now this in a way starkly contradicts India's obligation under many domestic and international law, which we are going to discuss today. Give me a minute, I'll have water. Now, the Rohingya refugees, they also constitute the world's largest population of any amount of stateless people, as it is approximated that about 28 lakh or 2.8 million of these Rohingya Muslims, they were forced to leave their home country of Myanmar, that is a Rakhine state. Now, whenever they were moving to another countries, they were denied citizenship, and also in their home countries like Myanmar, they were denied the usual rights that are existed to the citizens of our country, and they were not just denied rights, but they were also subjected to violence and persecution by the Myanmarese military authorities known as junta. Now, at present, these Rohingya Muslims, they were forced to be displaced across many countries, and it is expected that nearly 22,500 of these Rohingya Muslims, they have currently entered and are residing in India. Now, there are many countries in which these Rohingya Muslims have found refuge. It includes Saudi, UAE, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. Our today's discussion involves them coming into India. Now, you can understand that India or the protection that are available to them across the various multilateral treaties are recorded according to 1951 Refugee Convention and its 1967 Protocol. Now, the UN Refugee Convention of 1951 and its 67 Protocol, it provides for a principle of non-refoulement, which means any persecuted person, if he or she knocks the door of another country, that country cannot send the refugee back to its home country because of the fear that they might be killed or be persecuted there. So this is what the principle of non-refoulement states. Now, the Office of UN Commissioner for Human Rights, it has said that although this is a treaty which may or may not be signed by any country, but it is a kind of a customary law which is technically binding on all states, even on the parties that have not signed or that are not the parties of Refugee Convention. So this is the stand of UN, that any country, they should allow these refugees to enter into the country based on the fact that they are persecuted in their domestic country. On the other hand, India is saying that it is not a party to 1951 Convention or its 67 Protocol. In addition to not being a party to Convention Against Torture, other crime, cruel, human, degrading treatment and punishment, and International Convention for Protection of All Persons and Enforced Disappearance. Therefore, it is not a legal obligation on India to provide asylum to these Rohingya Muslims. And accordingly to its own laws and lands, India is continuing to detain Rohingya refugees under Foreigners Act 1946, Passport Act 1967. As this act, it provides sweeping powers to the government of India and the state governments to first of all recognize these illegal migrants and enable the authorities to deport these illegal migrants back to their home country. So according to today's article, it is actually wrong of India to denying them the refuge, and it is also more wrong on part of India to send them back to Myanmar. But you have to understand that there are many international obligations on India, as the Supreme Court in its various judgment has highlighted that even in the case of absence absence of domestic legislation, international conventions and norms, they can be applied so as to ensure dignity of human life. And Supreme Court did so even in the cases of Vishakha Others versus State of Rajasthan, where it provided for guidelines to prevent sexual harassment of women at workplaces, and also in the cases of National Legal Services Authority versus Union of India, where it provided for legal support to poor people even there if there was a no law in it. So according to this, the Supreme Court said that even though India is not a party to 1951 Refugee Convention and its 67 Protocol, it is a moral obligation in India to provide refuge to these refugees. Whereas Article 51C of the Indian Constitution, which provides that states must strive to promote respect for international law and treaty obligations. So these two are the reasons that have been cited to advocate so that India can provide refuge to refugees. But you have to understand, this refugee and its matter related is not just a humanitarian matter, rather it is a political matter, because if you allow any people coming from other part of the country, you are technically inviting them to disrupt your social fabric of the nation. And this has been the key reason why. And that is why India does not have a standardized refugee policy, and it treats people based on the political circumstances and if the economic circumstances allow. As previously we have seen, whenever the refugees emerged from Bangladesh during the time of 1971, it created a lot of societal problems in the region of Maharashtra, in the region of West Bengal, in the regions of Assam, and that is why India is apprehensive of hosting any kind of refugee population. Whereas on the other hand, Citizenship Amendment Act 2019, it excludes persecuted Muslims from Myanmar, so it is not even a legal obligation on the government. Also, you have to understand, these refugees, they face a lot of problems in India. First of all, they do not have a legal representation, so they cannot put their cases into the Indian courts, and also they are holded in detention centers which are quite dehuman in terms of the conditions existed in these detention centers. So that is why it is a kind of debate that has emerged, that should India not provide refuge to these people who are emigrating from Myanmar. Understood? Now let us move to another article. This article actually talks about the relationship of India and Sri Lanka. And why was this article published in news? Because the president of Sri Lanka was on his maiden visit to India, and it was also his first foreign visit. So let us try to understand the key takeaways of this visit. Now you have to understand, the present president of Sri Lanka came into power based on a historic mandate that decisively gave his government the majority in the region, and that is why this is quite crucial, because it will help reduce domestic fragmentation in the politics of Sri Lanka, and it will also allow the current president to deliver on promises that was hard in a politically difficult circumstances. Now, understanding this mandate, it is quite expected of Sri Lankan government so that it can continue with the IMF program for its economic recovery, and it can eventually occur or recover from its economic vulnerabilities. Also, there was this joint statement that was released after meeting of these two leaders, Mr. Modi and the president of Sri Lanka, and it signified a positive tone, which is a symbol of beginning of a deeper economic and strategic relationship between these two countries. Now, in this joint statement, there was this many statement that highlights that this was a significant visit. First was that the statement consisted that the Sri Lanka will not allow its own land to be used in a manner that is detrimental to India's interest. And you have to see this in light with the recent development of when China deployed its military assets such as submarines and warships into the Sri Lankan ports, and this put India into a very discomfortable position, because bringing these Chinese military assets so close to India's southern borders, it is very detrimental to India's territorial integrity. So naturally, India would want any Sri Lankan government not to allow these kind of Chinese activities in its region, and that is why such kind of a statement is very significant as far as India's territorial interest is concerned. Also, it highlighted evocation of free, open and safe and secure Indian Ocean region, which is also can be seen in the light of Chinese activities in the Indian Ocean region, which is perceived to deny the free, open and safe and secure Indian Ocean region. Also, issue of fishing and the catching of fishermen by the navies of these two countries is also a very touchy subject, particularly with the fishermen located in the state of Tamil Nadu and Sri Lankan fishermen. And it has been allowed that a coordinated fishing activity will be allowed so that the fishermen can actually navigate the waters which are between these two nations and can use it productively to undertake their livelihood, such as fishing activities. Also, the question of Tamil minority has been a biggest issue of hurdle between India and Sri Lanka relationship. As Tamil minorities, they were guaranteed in a peace agreement so that they will be protected by the various constitutional provision, particularly to the 13th amendment of the Sri Lankan constitution. Now, in the joint statement, it was said that it will fully be implemented, and accordingly, the provincial elections will also happen, which will allow the Tamil minorities living in the northern Sri Lankan region the right to choose their own representatives. So this not just gives political rights but also recognizes their cultural and social congruity with the Sri Lankan society in general. Also, it recognizes the positive role that the digital public infrastructure of India has played in the Indian economic growth, and similarly, such kind of services can also be used in the Sri Lankan own economy in terms of determining or developing payment services, identity cards, etc., as it can play a key role in Sri Lanka's own development. So this kind of a statement, it recognizes India's economic heft in the region, it recognizes India's security interest in the region and also the interest of people living in India, and hence the statement of the joint statement between India and Sri Lanka was quite accommodating to the needs of India. So that is why it is a huge development as far as international relations is concerned. Now let us move to another article. This actually summarizes Prime Minister Modi's maiden visit to the country of Kuwait. As Prime Minister Modi visited Kuwait between December 21 and 22, and it was the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 43 years, as the last visit was done by Mrs. Indira Gandhi when she was Prime Minister back in 1981. Now this visit not just plugs gap between the relationship between two countries but also gives a boost to rather stagnant ties. Understood. Now you have to understand the strategic significance of the Kuwait, and this can be seen from this particular map. Now Kuwait is located in the north west part of the Persian Gulf here, and this is a very important region as far as the global trade of crude oil is concerned. Now, as I told you, it is located in the northeastern end of the Persian Gulf, and it shares its borders with Iraq and Saudi Arabia. And in addition to this strategic location, this Kuwait also hosts many important American military bases. Now you have to understand, Kuwait is just only monarchy in the region that has experimented successfully with the democracy, and also on a regional issue, Kuwait has rather maintained a neutral stance, that it has not favored Iran so much and not it has favored Saudi Arabia so much. So Kuwait in general has the ability to play the role of a mediator or an interlocutor in order to resolve the disputes between Middle Eastern nations, which we understand happens quite a lot. So that is why the location and position of Kuwait is quite strategic. Now for India, let us understand the strategic importance for Kuwait. First of all, Kuwait is a wealthy nation which is owed primarily to its huge crude oil reserves, which is 6th largest globally, and it is also one of the founding members of OPEC, which is a cartel of crude oil producing nations. Also, Kuwait, in addition to having a huge amount of crude oil deposits, it also has a large basket of sovereign wealth fund which is managed by Kuwait Investment Authority. And you understand the size of this management or the money is $924 billion, which is about $200 and $250 billion more than India's own forex reserves. So this, if it can be deployed into an economic activity, it can create opportunities for increased businesses. So this is 4th largest in the world after Norway, China and the UAE. So this highlights the importance of Kuwait for India. Now let us try to understand what are the existing links that exist between India and Kuwait. Now historically these two countries have enjoyed a friendly ties, and India was first of the countries in the East that had the diplomatic relations with Kuwait, and until 1961 the Indian rupee was considered as a legal tender in Kuwait. Now in terms of economy, the trade between these two nations is close to $10.5 billion, and Kuwait is 6th largest supplier of crude oil to India, which meets about 3% of India's crude oil needs. Now KIA, that is Kuwait Investment Authority, has invested indirectly in India with an estimated investments of more than $10 billion. So not just the relationship is quite affected or quite comfortable, but even the economic interdependence of these two countries based on each other is quite high. Now in terms of people to people ties, India and Kuwait enjoy close ties, as about 20% of Kuwait's population, which is about 4.9 million people, about 1.1 million people is of Indian origin, and this is the largest expatriate group living in Kuwait. And this is why, because India is, or Indian people living in Kuwait, they are the ones most trusted people. Also during COVID-19 pandemic, the relationship between these two countries improved as the other country recognized the need of the other country and hence provided support whatever it can. For example, India provided 2 lakh vaccines to Kuwait, whereas in the second wave, Kuwait provided India with oxygen cylinders, concentrators, ventilators, and other medical supplies. So a friend in need is actually a friend indeed, right? So this is what the role of Kuwait is for India. Now, there are many untapped regions which has the potential to get better once the relationship between these two countries improve. First is by signing a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement. India can actually start ideally with Kuwait, and it is also looking to provide a defense cooperation between these two countries. Now, India is looking to export defense equipments, and thereby Kuwait's need in form of defense equipments can be met by India, and therefore the defense cooperation between these two countries are very essential. Also, India has invited Kuwait to be a part of coalition for disaster resilient nations, and also there is an agreement between KIA and India's sovereign wealth fund NIIF to mutually beneficial and give impetus to India's growth, as the fund which is there with KIA, if it is invested in India in one form or the other, can provide for foreign investment in India, which is ultimately will be beneficial for Indian economy. Now, Kuwait, it can also partner India for storing strategic oil reserves, as storing strategic oil reserves is actually a need for these countries, and also it requires huge amount of money, and hence India can help or seek help of Kuwait in this regard. Further, cooperation in the field of civil aviation and space sector is essential, as India is a key space power, and the needs of Kuwait as far as space needs are concerned by sending satellites etc. can be met by India's Space Research Organization. Understood? So this is the reason why the untapped potential between these two countries can be utilized at the maximum level. Now let us move to another article. This one actually appeared in the explain section, and it states that how the Houthi of Yemen, they figure out in the Iran's axis of resistance against Israel. Now you have to understand the Houthis, they have been in a strong position in civil war which is currently involved between Houthis on one hand and the Sunni powers like UAE and Saudi on the other. And based on this improved condition, Houthis have also conducted bombing missions in Israel, which has put Houthis directly against the Israeli might. Now let us try to understand what the Houthis are doing. It is actually a part of Iran's axis of resistance, as Iran has constituted an informal coalition of non-state actors to check the growth of Israel as well as US in the region. For example, from this map you can understand on one hand there is Iran and a state of non-state actors, particularly Hezbollah, which is located in Lebanon, Hamas, which is located in Gaza and currently involved in war with Israel, as well as Yemen, that is ruled by Houthis. Now these constitute what is called as 3H of the region. Now in addition to these 3H, there are other parties also located in Iraq, located within Israel, who are a part of this informal axis of resistance against Israel. Understood? So this is actually an informal coalition of Iran and Iran supported militia as well as political organizations, and the sole intention of this informal coalition is to tackle or to counter the rise of Israel and US interest in the region. Now after Houthis, they conducted bombing from here in Yemen till here in Israel. It created a lot of tension in the Red Sea region. Now you have to understand this Red Sea region is very strategically significant because here the trade happens through Gulf of Aden and the ships traverse this Red Sea and into this Suez Tunnel located here, and it reaches the port of Mediterranean waters. Now whenever there is a disturbance in the water, so naturally the ships that would have been traversing through Red Sea would have to find an alternative route, and the alternative route of this Red Sea is rather quite a long route through Cape of Good Hope, and hence the ships traversing this longer route would have to take larger amount of time, and it will also increase the shipping cost if it were to send goods from India here directly to Europe, as against the cheaper option of sending it through Red Sea and through Suez Canal. So as there are tensions in this region, so the ships do not have any option but to traverse this longer path, which increases cost and time to the goods and services. Understood? So this is why such kind of an informal coalition although is acting against Israel's interest, but it is also indirectly against the interest of global community, as it increases the cost and time to take the global trade in the region. Understood? Now let us move to another article. This one actually summarizes the India's underwater sea power. Now this actually tells us about the ability of India and how it can demonstrate its power into the near region. And it says that first is an Operation Sankalp, which expanded the Indian Ocean or the Indian Navy's reach from Strait to Hormuz to directly into Red Sea, as India conducted safety and security of shipping and piracy, and it provided assistance to ships that were targeted by Houthi rebels. Now this kind of a mission that has been undertaken by Indian Navy, it has strengthened India's Navy position, and it has also bestowed the status of the net security partner and first responder in the Indian Ocean region. Now this area in 2024, as I've told you in the previous article, it witnessed several critical developments, and therefore undersea warfare is very important in the region also. Now let us try to summarize India's undersea water capabilities. First of all is that India hosts a significant number of SSBMs, that is the ballistic missile submarines, which are powered by nuclear power. The most important development last year was actually the commissioning of the new submarine INS Arighat, which is the successor of INS Arihant submarine. Now it is a nuclear powered ballistic missile capable submarine designated as SSBN. Now these submarines, they are having K4 submarine launched ballistic missiles, which provide or the ability to target rain or weapons or enemies as far as 3,500 kilometers. In addition to these submarines, the Indian cabinet has given permission to construct newer submarines into the Project 77, which will allow construction of 2 nuclear powered attack submarines known as SSNs, and this will be undertaken at the cost of 40,000 crores. Now let us look at the more conventional options. Now India has the submarines under Project 75I, where 6 Scorpion submarines were constructed in India's Madgaon Dock Limited with the active cooperation of French company, and this consists of INS Wagshir, which will soon be commissioned into the Indian Navy, and India is looking to order 3 more such submarines so as to fill the void of earlier submarines being decommissioned. Now the advanced part of this project include Project 75I, where the new submarines, which will having the air independent propulsion technology, will be constructed and then inducted into Indian Navy. And further, India has given approval to 100-ton unmanned underwater vehicles, which will provide a low cost option and a high return on investment if India were to develop on its undersea power. So this is article, it summarizes beautifully the Indian capabilities as far as development of submarines is concerned, and you understood in our today's discussion that India has primarily 3 types of submarines. First are conventional diesel powered submarines, whereas the rest 2 sections include nuclear powered submarines, which are both attack submarines as well as ballistic missile powered submarines. Understood? Now, there are many hurdles and suggestions that can be incorporated in order to remove these hurdles. First are that any project which is envisaged by Indian Armed Forces, these are long drawn or these face long drawn budgetary issues, because procurement of any new set of defense related equipment, these are quite costly affair, and hence they require sustained funding in order to make it viable economically and technologically. Further, there is a mismatch between planned acquisition and also modernization of the existing weapon platforms, and for that we need cooperation and collaboration with strategic partners and other friendly maritime nations, particularly US, Russia as well as France. Also, these projects, they face excessive time delays right from the time tender is issued till the time final submarine has been procured by the Indian Navy, and for that we need streamlined process, shortlisting of original equipment manufacturers, and issuance and evaluation of tenders that would require a significant focus on the part of Indian policymakers. Understood? Now let us move to another article. This one actually said that Indian Defence Ministry has signed a pact more than 7,600 crores worth of it to procure 100 new artillery guns. Now they are not talking about the usual artillery guns that the Indian Army has, as these kind of artillery guns, although they have the ability to strike targets as far as 45 to 48 kilometers, but these are not self-powered. Rather, they are talking about these Vajra tanks, which are actually self-propelled howitzer or artillery guns. Now they have the ability to fire 155 mm 52 caliber shells in a manner which is self-propelled artillery system. Now as against the self-propelled ones, these kind of artillery systems need to be towed by a truck Rather than that, these kind of artillery guns, they have a self-propelled capability which can take them without any active support by another vehicle. Now, this kind of a platform is built by India's own company Larsen and Toubro, based on the technology which is transferred by a Korean company called as Hanwha Defense, based on its K9 Thunder platform. Now, the feature of this K9 Vajra is that it has an all-welded steel armor, it has a burst rate that it can fire 3 rounds per 15 seconds, and has a maximum rate of fire about 6 to 8 rounds per minute for continuous period of 3 minutes. Now, it has a zero turning radius, which makes it quite mobile in nature, and hence these kind of platforms has also been deployed into very tough locations like Ladakh to counter the aggressive moves by China. So, you understand the importance of this military platform. Now, let us move to another article. This says that after a period of 13 years, protected area regime is set to be back in Manipur. Now, let us understand the context. Now, you understand Manipur is witnessing the insurgency because the two tribals in the region, Kuki tribals as well as Methi people, they are involved in a conflict. And according to Government of India, this conflict is actually supported by insurgent groups which are located across the border in Myanmar's territory. So, as to check these kind of groupings, the protected area permit is actually back in Manipur. Now, from now on, any foreigners who will be visiting these 3 northeastern states will have to seek prior permission and special permits from the government if they want to visit these 3 states. Now, let us understand what are protected area permit. These were actually implemented in form of making any area protected area in accordance to Foreigner Protected Areas Order 1958. And after an area is declared as a protected area, any foreigner national, they are not allowed to visit this protected area until and unless they are given a specific permission by the union government. Now, they have to justify the reasons why they are visiting this area, and there are certain conditions or certain areas even in the protected areas that actually cannot be visited by the foreigners even with a permit. Now, these are issued by Ministry of Home Affairs, and the authorities of the state concerned, they can also use, and the prior permission from MHA is needed if it is for permit related to tourism in the areas that are specifically prohibited from allowing tourists. Now, the history actually, this protected area was in place until 2010. And this regime has been extended to Arunachal, Sikkim, Manipur, Mizoram as well as Nagaland, including the parts of northern borders, Jammu and Kashmir, Rajasthan, Himachal as well as Uttarakhand. Now, in 2011, the relaxation of this protected area permit was given in certain areas of Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland in order to boost tourism in this area. However, certain restrictions still applied, especially for foreigners originating from Afghanistan, China and Pakistan, as these nationals needed prior approval from MHA even in the areas that were relaxed from the restrictions of PAP. Understood? Now, let us move to the last article of this day. This article actually highlighted that all 17,130 police stations in the country, they are linked or based on the portal of CCNTS. Now, CCNTS is actually an abbreviation for Crime and Criminal Tracking Network and System, and it is a centralized online platform where the police actually can file FIRs, charge sheet and investigation report, and it provides an online database which can be accessed by any law enforcement authority across the country. Now, this system is actually based, or it consists of data of past and current crime records, including data of accused, charge sheets of the person, convicts, habitual offenders, and it also consists of databases of persons who are missing, unverified bodies and persons, and also the details of stolen vehicles. Also, the biometrics of criminals are registered. So, actually, if a crime happens by a known criminal in another part of the country, the police can actually know if that person is involved in another crime across the country. Understood? Now, this platform, it can generate analytical reports also and crime statistics, which can happen research or which can actually promote research in the police and crime justice related incidents. Also, the scope of CCNTS has been enhanced over the years so as to integrate police data with other pillars of the criminal justice system, that is prisons, courts, forensics, etc. Understood? So, this is all for our today's discussion for the monthly current affairs of international relations and security. Please stay tuned to the Study IQ IAS channel for more such videos and updates.